This video is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. We have a really good Fight Night card here. The last couple months have been pretty lackluster with Fight Night cards, but this one's a bit different. You know, Brandon Moreno headlining a Fight Night card. Yair Rodrigues is on it as well. Brian Ortega, Brandon Royval, 2 former champions, and all 4 title contenders. A lot of Mexicans on the card. Daniel Zellhuber is one of the best Mexican prospects in the world right now. Raul Rosas Jr. is another good prospect. Jasmine Yaragüe, if she could come back from that loss, man. Getting knocked out in like 20 seconds is pretty rough, and for the first time losing in her professional career. Hopefully she could bounce back in this fight, and they're giving her a bit of a bone here with Sam Hughes. Manuel Torres is a very good fighter as well, and a big win streak, another lightweight. Felipe dos Santos is back in the octagon. He showed out against one of the better. He showed out against Manuel. He looked really good in that fight, especially for his UFC debut, and he's a very young fighter. Gonna be interesting to see how he goes moving forward. And Muhammad Naimov, which is gonna be the first fight on the card. He's an interesting prospect. The last fight had a lot of foul play in it, but he is a pretty good fighter. The prospect of the night, in my opinion, I think Raul Rosas Jr. has the highest ceiling. Raul's 19 years old. He is very talented, has a lot of potential. The sky is the limit for this kid. The fighter of the night is easily Brandon Moreno, the biggest Mexican MMA fighter in the world, and he's yet in another rematch. These recent flyweights have a lot of rematches on their records. They keep fighting each other and no one young is able to come up and burst through those gates. The stake of the night, the fighter that is in hot waters, is Daniel da Silva. He is winless in his last 5 fights, should be on a 5-loss streak because the last fight was a no contest. The guy was going to get tapped out, but the ref just completely messed that up. Good thing though, they are going to rematch and right every wrong of that fight. Just make sure that same ref is not in this. The banger of the night, the most explosive fun fight on the card, I would think is Yair Rodrigues versus Brian Ortega. These 2 guys are always in wars and I'm expecting another one, but I wonder what Ortega is going to look like after such a long layoff. Does he come out more wrestling? Did he work on his wrestling this whole time and actually develop a skill that's complementary to his style? It's going to be interesting with Ortega on this one. And the fight of the night, I believe, is also the co-main event, honestly. Yair and Ortega is just overall the best fight. I think Yair and Ortega is the best fight on the card, but it could be the main event as well. They're by far the best 2 fights. And I will also say Zellhuber and Prado is a good runner-up. So we're going to start with the first fight and go all the way to the main event. Muhammad Naimov versus Erik Silva. So in his last fight, Muhammad Naimov had a lot of fouls against Nathaniel Wood. They both rocked each other in the fight. Naimov showed to have a very good right overhand counter, but he also got rocked by the right straight of Nathaniel Wood. And the right straight is the main thing that Erik Silva throws forward. The guy is all offense, man. He really doesn't have much defensive skills in the stand-up, doesn't guard well, doesn't move his head that well. He's kind of chaotic with his style. He'll throw the flying knee into a right straight and just keep going forward. And it makes his fights a bit sloppy, and you saw that a lot when he fought TJ Brown. So it leads you to believe that Naimov's counter hook should be a big weapon for him to win this fight. I could see Erik Silva throwing the right straight, Naimov countering him with the overhand, rocking him, and Erik Silva did get controlled a bit by TJ Brown. I do expect Naimov to do something kind of similar here, but he just has to watch out for any reversals from Erik Silva to get his back, because that rear naked choke is nasty, man. So ultimately, I'm going to go with Muhammad Naimov, and I'm going to go by a second round TKO. Then we go to the 33-year-old 5'8" Victor Altamirano versus the 23-year-old 5'7" Felipe dos Santos. I gotta go Felipe dos Santos for sure, man. He's like little Charles Oliveira down there, man, in the flyweight division. Has a lot of power, good straight punches, doesn't move his head too much, but has a lot of heart, a good ground game. And the experience of going up against Manuel and competing as well as he did is only going to make him a much better fighter going into this next one. Victor is a southpaw fighter, throws a lot of kicks, has that wide southpaw stance, and really just looks to snipe you with the left straight and the left kick. And if you put any kind of pressure on him, he kind of crumbles. And I think Felipe dos Santos is going to win through that, right? He might get caught by a couple kicks to the body, maybe one to the head, but I think he should be able to put the pressure on Victor enough where he overwhelms him and breaks him. So I'm going Felipe dos Santos by a 3rd round TKO. Then we go to the 24-year-old 5'6" Luis Rodrigues versus a 31-year-old 5'6" Dennis Bondar. This is going to be Rodrigues' UFC debut. This fight is going to be a war. Rodrigues and Bondar both like to walk the opponent down, stay right in their face, and just throw hands, man. Rodrigues keeps his hands lower than Bondar does, but he's so confident in his chin and confident in his power. He throws a whipping left hook, man, and that could be a bit of an issue for Bondar. But Bondar moves his head, right? Whereas Rodrigues really doesn't. And he was throwing a pretty good right overhand at Carlos Hernandez in his last fight, which I could definitely see catching someone like Luis Rodrigues. This is a very hard fight to predict, in my opinion. If the fight goes to the ground, we're going to see some good scrambles. Both guys have a very good submission ability. I think Bondar is going to do a better job of landing his shots and getting away, but I see him dipping into some of the left hooks as well. But ultimately, I'm going to go with Dennis Bondar, and I think he's going to win this by a decision. Then go to Claudio Puelles, the Imanari Imanari roller is back, going up against Ziam. Puelles has not fought since November of 2022 when he got embarrassed by Dan Hooker, but he was on a pretty long win streak before that. Whereas Ziam is on a 2-fight win streak right now, beating Jai Herbert and Mikkel Figlock. But he himself has not been too active. He's had 1 fight since Puelles lost to Dan Hooker. But I like Ziam in this fight. I think he's much more well-rounded. Unless Puelles took that time off to just get better and, he comes back a completely different fighter, I think Ziam should be able to shut down a lot of the Imanari rolls, keep the fight standing, and just outstrike this guy. So I'm gonna go Ziam by a decision win. Then we get to the rematch of Edgar Chairez versus Daniel Da Silva. I got Chairez again. Hopefully this time the ref does not stop the fight prematurely. I think he shuts down Daniel Da Silva just like last time. So I'm going with Edgar Chairez by another submission win, but this time in the second round. I'm expecting Daniel Da Silva to be a little bit more safe and defensive in this one, not to expose himself as much as he did before. Then with the Jesus Aguilar versus Mateus Medonca. Aguilar is coming off that big knockout win over Shannon Ross that happened like 17 seconds into the fight. But before that loss to Tatsuo Taira, which is not a bad guy to lose to right now. Tatsuo Taira for that skill level is just an absolute monster, whereas Mateus Medonca is coming off a 2-loss streak and a horrible one against Nate Maness, so you definitely see better confidence on Jesus Aguilar's side. Medonca's got a pretty good aggressive game, he just doesn't really move his head. He will sometimes walk into straight lines and Aguilar could definitely whip in that right overhand right at him, but I think the leg kicks from Aguilar are going to be very damaging in this one. Medonca made a big mistake against Nate Maness where he was constantly going for leg locks and ate a bunch of punches in the meantime that softened him up until an eventual ground and pound finish. Something similar could happen for Aguilar as well. It's a very hard fight to call in my opinion. It could really go either way, but I'm gonna go with Jesus Aguilar. I think he has the better mental state going into it. He has those devastating leg kicks, and Medonca just walks into punches sometimes, which is not good, man. But he has a good straight, a decent jab to put Aguilar in perpetual motion, but every time he backs up, he's going to attack that leg, and I don't know if Medonca is gonna deal with those too well. Then we got Cristian Quinonez going up against Raoni Barcelos. A bit of an age gap between these two. Quinonez is 27 years old, Barcelos is 36. And at one point in his career, Barcelos was looking like he was going to be a contender in the bantamweight division. He had that controversial loss to Timur Valiev. Then he lost to Victor Henry, which was shocking to everybody. He was such a massive favorite going into it. But he did beat Trevin Jones and then got knocked out badly by Umar Nurmagomedov, losing after the Kyler Phillips. Cristian Quinonez is coming off a loss against Kyung Ho Kong, which came very quickly. But before that beat Kali Taha, right? And it was on a bit of a win streak because of his younger age and competing a bit better than Raoni Barcelos is. I think he should be mentally better in this fight. But Barcelos, I believe, has better skills overall. He has an extremely good striking game. He has good subtle head movements, a whipping left hook, good leg kicks, excellent combinations, able to get on the outside of the opponent's punches pretty well, and has a lights out takedown defensive game. He did get taken down by Kyler Phillips though, but Kyler Phillips is a very underrated fighter. That guy is well rounded, and Quinonez does not defend shots well at all. He has some good parries on the jab, but walks into punches, has his head up high, and gets leg kicked very, very easily. The only thing is that he just keeps bouncing around, and I think Barcelos should be able to take advantage of this style, but man, at his older age, I just don't like it. Quinonez could land something crazy and just knock him out, but I'm going with Raoni Barcelos even at his older age, and I think he's going to win by a decision. Then we go to Manuel Torres versus Chris Duncan. Both guys are quite powerful. Torres is on a knockout streak right now. His last 3 wins have been by knockout. He's on a 5-win streak, whereas Chris Duncan's on a 4-win streak, most of them by decision though. He got most of his knockouts before the UFC, like when he was fighting back in Bellator. That elbow that Torres landed on Nicolas Mata was one of the most powerful elbows I've ever seen. Full force, full body behind it, sent Mata flying backwards. This guy is super lethal in the stand-up, and he can fight both in southpaw and orthodox. All power punches, man. This guy does not really take power off of his shots, but he will have this setup where he probes with his lead hand, he brings it forward, and he hops behind it as the opponent starts moving, and then he finds the right hook around the guard, or he's looking for openings on the opponent's guard for his shots to land. That's why he's quite accurate with some of the power punches that he throws. This was definitely shown in his Frank Camacho fight. But Frank Camacho doesn't really move too much. He doesn't really have much defense. He kind of just covers up and trades with you and stuff. So it's not going to be the same thing like when he fights against Chris Duncan. Because Chris Duncan will fight a little bit better with range. He will stay away to just slam leg kicks, present with some feints forward and stuff like that. So he is a lot trickier to hit and a lot trickier to read than who Torres has been fighting so far. And Chris Duncan did a pretty good job against Yanel Ashmos, who's quite powerful himself. Torres doesn't really have much defense to him. He will keep his hands up and plot plot until he lands the shot or finds the opening, then he just puts it on you. And that's what makes this fight kind of difficult to predict, because if Torres lands on Duncan, this fight could be over. But Duncan is way smarter than anybody Torres has fought so far. Way smarter, not even close. So I'm ultimately going to go with a more intelligent fighter here. I'm going to go with Chris Duncan. I like his setups. I like his ability to fade away from shots and not stand in front of Torres or get overwhelmed with his pressure and cage cutting ability. But it is a very dangerous fight that could go either way. But I'm going to go with Chris Duncan by a first round TKO. I think Torres is going to walk into some big overhands. Then we're going to Jasmine Yair versus Sam Hughes. Definitely have to go with Yair. Jasmine Yair is one of the most talented female fighters in the entire world right now. What she was able to do in Combate, and even the fight before she got knocked out against Estela Nunes, you could definitely see the talent that she has, right? She's mostly a striker. She has a great understanding of fundamental striking, amazing body kicks, really snappy with everything that she throws. And Sam Hughes is not really that good. There's no other way to say it. I mean, she doesn't have much impressive skills. So I'm going to go with Jasmine Yair by a decision win. I think she's going to play this one a little bit safer, considering that she just got knocked out in like 20 seconds. And then we go to Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. They're both 1-1 in their last 2 fights. Raul had an explosive approach against Terrence Mitchell, who just got cut from the UFC, which is kind of sad. That doesn't make it a good look for their prospect. You know, I don't know why they would cut him that quickly. The guy lost to 2 really good prospects, and they just cut him like that. And it makes those prospects' resume look worse when they do something like that. But the thing about Turcio is so we know that Raul Rosas Jr. is going to be way more lethal and dangerous in pretty much everything. He hits harder, he's way faster, he has a better ground game, he's way better with his submissions. He just has to be a bit more composed with this guy. Turcios is a bit more defensive and will play it safe sometimes. He hasn't fought in a pretty long time, right? Since November of 2022. Barely won that fight against Kevin Natividad. Raul had 3 fights since Ricky last fought. So if Raul stays a little bit more composed and not tries to bulldoze through, he should get a very clean win here, as long as he just does not expose himself. So I'm going with Raul Rosas Jr. by a 3rd round submission. I think eventually the damage is going to settle in. I think Raul should be able to show a bit of an experienced, mature performance where he picks at the opponent, finds these setups, as the opponent constantly covers up and moves away. Raul needs to block the head kicks with putting good pressure on him, stalking him on the cage, so he has that backup takedown if he needs to go to it. Then with the Daniel Zellhuber versus Francisco Prado, this is one of the best fights on the card. Both these guys are very good. Great records too, 14-1 for Zellhuber, 12-1 for Prado. Zellhuber is an enormous lightweight. He's 24 years old, 6'1" with a 77-inch reach, has a lot of power in his strikes, and quite a good submission game like he showed against Christos Giagos. In his last fight, he's on a 2-fight win streak against Lando Venata and Giagos, whereas Francisco Prado is 21 years old. He's 5'11" with a 69-inch reach, so short reach for his height, and has never won by a decision. He destroyed Atman Azaitar in the first round in his last fight, but before that lost to Jamie Malarkey. Jamie Malarkey is such an inconsistent fighter. Both guys like to stand in front of the opponent, but of course Zellhuber is going to have a major reach advantage, and he likes to keep that reach out there. A lot of good jabs, a lot of good body kicks, but he has these low shoulders when he throws punches, which can leave him open to a counter overhand from Prado whenever he's throwing. And Prado sometimes will stick in the pocket and risk getting hit by a knee or an elbow or something crazy like that, but he had a good spinning elbow against Atman Azaitar. But I don't expect it to land on someone like Zellhuber, who's constantly looking to keep range on the opponent like that, which is going to be the most problematic thing for Prado in this fight. How does he get in on Zellhuber when he's throwing these jabs and front kicks and straights and uppercuts? He can weave his way in for the overhands, and I think that's the best way he can go about it. I don't know if he's going to shoot a takedown. That would be really interesting. The last time someone shot a takedown on Zellhuber, he choked him out with an anaconda choke, which makes this fight very difficult to predict. I think Zellhuber is going to win the majority of the fight because of how many jabs and uppercuts and front kicks he will land before Prado's able to get in. But if Prado does get in the pocket, I think Zellhuber is going to be in a bit of trouble. Unless he could tie him up and throw knees and elbows, then Prado's going to have an issue here. But I just don't know if Zellhuber is going to do it. If he does that, this fight changes for him. But if he doesn't do it, he might get clipped. One small technique like that can change this fight completely, and I just don't know if he's going to use it. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go Daniel Zellhuber, and I'm going to go by a decision win, but it's very close. It can go either way. I don't know how Zellhuber is going to deal with Prado's entries. So if you guys want to go and capitalize on your picks here, make sure to go to mybookie.ag where they got the best lines for you. Starting with the main event, you got Brandon Moreno as a -290 favorite over the +230 Brandon Royval. Pretty much indicating that Moreno's going to run right through him and make it an easy fight just like last time, but hopefully Royval doesn't get injured in this one. Yair and Ortega is actually pretty close. Yair is a -150. I expect him to be a bigger favorite, especially with Ortega not fighting in so long. Daniel Zellhuber is a minus 280 over Francisco Prado, who's a plus 220. I think that's way too wide. I think it should be a lot closer than that. Prado is a very, very good fighter, man. And Zellhuber sometimes could be a little bit hittable, even though he does have that long reach. Raul Rosas Jr. is a minus 220 over the plus 180 Ricky Turcios. I think those are fine. I do like Raul in that fight. The biggest favorite on the card is Jasmine Yargway, minus 600 over the plus 425 Sam Hughes. Makes sense. Manuel Torres is a minus 180 over Chris Duncan, so that's an interesting one, especially if you're going with Chris Duncan. Torres is a very powerful guy. He could definitely make it happen, but I do like Chris Duncan as an underdog going into it, but it is a fight that I wouldn't recommend betting on. Cristian Quinonez is a plus 150 against Raoni Barcelos, who's the minus 175. That makes sense as well. Jesus Aguilar is the very slight underdog, plus 100 against the minus 120 Mateus Medonca. I'm going with the slight underdog, but it can go either way. It's another fight that probably not bet on due to how close it can be. Edgar Chairez, massive favorite. He's even bigger than I checked a couple days ago. He's a minus 450 this time against the plus 325 Daniel de Silva. I think Chairez is definitely going to win again. He's a fighter that I would put on a parlay for myself. Jasmine Yargway and probably Raul Rosas Jr. as well. Claudio Puelles is a plus 175 against the minus 210 for Ziam. I think Ziam's a little too big of a favorite. Ziam is not that great to be considered that much better than Puelles. Luis Rodrigues is a minus 120 against the plus 100 Denis Bondar. This fight can go either way. It's another fight I would not really bet on. Victor is a plus 245 against the massive favorite Felipe dos Santos, minus 310. I agree with that as well. I think Felipe should definitely win that fight, even though he does put himself in risky positions. There's always a chance with these kind of fighters that they can get clipped, but he was able to withstand a lot of the damage from Manel Cap. Wait, Jasmine Yargway is not the biggest favorite. Muhammad Naimov is a minus 750? Really? I do pick him to win, but not by that much. He got rocked by Nathaniel Wood from a simple straight, and Erik Silva commits with a lot of power as well. He is mostly known for his rear naked chokes, but Naimov will definitely open himself up due to some powerful strikes like that. So minus 750, I don't even know if it's even worth betting on Naimov, considering he's that big. I mean, you barely get anything off of him, and there's a possibility he doesn't even win. So very interesting odds here, and if you guys want to go to capitalize on these, make sure to sign up for the deposit bonus. For your first deposit, they'll match it all the way up to $1,000. So if you put like 100, they'll give you another 100 on top of that to play with, and all you have to do is use the promo code WEASEL, that's WEASLE, to take advantage of MyBookie's sign-up offer. It's going to come with a rollover withdrawal requirement. Just visit mybookie.ag today where you can win big. And let's get right into the featured fights. And then we go to the featured fights. We start with Yair Rodrigues versus Brian Ortega. And the winner of this fight could fight Ilia Topuria next. So there's a lot of stakes on it, man. And the last time Brian Ortega has fought was July of 2022 against Yair. He's 1-3 in his last 4 fights, whereas Yair had 2 fights since Ortega last fought against Josh Emmett and Alexander Volkanovski. I think stylistically, with the activity, Yair is just a very tough fight for Brian Ortega, and he put him in an armbar before. That is rough, right? That's mentally rough for Ortega to get past, because he's not going to really get much on the feet, I think, against Yair. Yair probably learned so much from the Volk fight. The biggest thing Ortega has for a striking is the fact that he could take a big shot and keep going, and he has a lot of power. Yair did get rocked by Volk and then TKO'd, which doesn't normally happen to him, right? Yair usually has a very, very good chin. It might have gotten cracked by Volk, and if Ortega could catch him with one big overhand or left hook, it wouldn't surprise me if Yair just went down from it. But I'm not expecting it. I'm expecting both guys to have a good chin. I'm expecting both guys to have a good gas tank. Yair's going to be throwing a lot of stuff out there. Ortega might get kicked to the face 1,000 times before he attempts a takedown, which I still to this day don't understand why he doesn't primarily focus on his wrestling. And I think because he's been inactive for a year and a half, he's going to be a little bit slower than usual. He's probably going to get jabbed up from distance and run into some right straights. Potentially a flying knee can catch him. And Ortega knows if the fight goes to the ground, it is not easy. So I think at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Yair Rodrigues by a decision win. I think if Ortega's far away from him, he's going to get kicked to the head, into the body, as well as being jabbed all day. And if he gets in close, there's some wildness that Yair can hit him with, and we know Ortega does not cover up that well. His chin is his main defense, and that is the worst thing going up against someone like Yair. Then we go to the main event, Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval, the rematch, and Royval's taking this fight on short notice, as Amir Abazi was the original opponent, and Royval just came off a fight with the champion Alexandre Pantoja. How did the first fight go? Royval did get injured, but he was losing that fight. Like, he was trying these spinning attacks and Moreno was timing them, got to his back, dragged him to the ground. Royval kept trying to attack the leg. Moreno at one point got his back, stayed composed from the leg lock attempts, and Royval's shoulder popped out when Royval was trying to get on top of Moreno and also attack the leg. Finished off by ground and pound afterward, and it just looked like Moreno was a step ahead of Royval, and this was before we see the Moreno of today. Moreno has evolved so much. He would destroy that guy that beat Royval back then, whereas Royval has not evolved nearly as much as Moreno has. He still kind of throws the same stuff, he still kind of moves the same, doesn't really have a different approach to the game, and I think Moreno should be able to punish all of the craziness and wild strikes that Royval throws out there. Stays composed, sees everything, reads all the setups, lands a ton of good jabs, 1-2s, big left hooks to the body, big body kicks, could even clinch up with him and trip him to the ground to dominate on top. I think Moreno might dominate Brandon Royval in this one. So I'm going to go with Brandon Moreno, and I'm going to go by a 3rd round submission. So those are the predictions for the UFC Moreno vs. Royval 2 card. It's a really good one. A lot of good fighters on here. Great prospects. Definitely one of the better fight nights in some time. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions, and if you did, make sure to give this a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.